Hello everyone, Kaoz here, and welcome to another old school RuneScape video. Combat could potentially change forever in OSRS, but not in the way you might think. You see, when veteran players hear something like that, we could have flashbacks to the evolution of combat, which essentially changed the RuneScape 2 into RuneScape 3. This time around, I'm talking about one of the most recent blogs where Jagex is going over a few potential changes to spice up combat weapons, spells, and also a couple of buffs to some training methods and other core mechanics. If you're like me, you probably don't like reading blogs, so this will be the first time you hear about this. Let's dive right into what could bring huge changes to the game. Scapers, if you haven't already, make sure to hit the subscribe and the like buttons, as we're aiming for 100k this year. If we hit the goal, I'll go skydiving and share it with you. You can also join our Discord server to hang out and to chat with us. This time around, I have two quick disclaimers for you. The most important one is that everything we are going to talk about today is just concept, as Jagex is still going over feedback for potential changes. The second one is that if any of these make it into the game, especially the combat ones, remember that they are considered integrity changes and they will not be pulled to players. This is what happened to the blowpipe and other items a few years ago, but more about that later. Boys and girls, let's see what the future holds for old school RuneScape and get right into it. Okay, before we get into the juicy part of the video, let's quickly talk about a few changes to scaling and other miscellaneous proposals to make different parts of the game maybe a little bit less frustrating to interact with. I will mention all the proposals and give you my personal opinion at the end of each segment. We are going to start with mining. Jagex wants to change the motherlode mine when it comes to a low intensity method, as well as providing useful resources that are up to par with slow experience per hour. They also want to make the volcanic mine's approachability, which could mean making it more accessible, especially to solo players. The blast mine could also receive some love and increase its viability as a high intensity method. Finally, we might also see a few tweaks for amethyst mining. More specifically, the veins you have to mine. At this point, we don't know what that means, but I'm sure it will keep its iconic AFK feature for low experience per hour. And speaking of things located in the mining guild, all 3 pairs of mining gloves are also being looked at, as their current effect is heavily underpowered for the amount of time they take to obtain. Other small changes to mining in general are reconsidering the hard Karamja diary for the underground gemrock mine, more clue geodes when mining, and more spots to potentially 3-tick granite in the desert, as to my knowledge there aren't many rocks there to be able to set up a 3-tick cycle if you want to speedrun the mining skill. Finally, Volcano might also be improved in a way that gives players the option to focus on either more experience or more loot per hour, as well as looking into how the boss scales up with a number of players in the group. From what I remember, doing Volcano solo is extremely tedious, and you're not really going to be doing it if not for the combat achievement. In general, these changes feel great, and it doesn't really look like Jagex is trying to shift the meta on your way to 99, but rather just make a few spots a little more meaningful depending on what you want to do. Full AFK, semi-AFK, or high-intensity methods for all of them to feel more rewarding for the amount of effort needed to interact with them. I am especially interested in the changes to the volcanic mine, amethyst rocks, and the mining gloves. From what I know, it's not super viable soloing the volcanic mine, and I have never worn my expert gloves since I got them, and maybe they can add a cool passive effect to encourage people to both obtain them and use them for either more experience or resources per hour. Agility has less potential changes, but all of them welcome nonetheless. The big talking point is rebalancing both the training course, experience, and requirements. Again, we don't have any further information on this, but I'm curious to see how they would work around agility levels needed for all courses, or even if the experience per hour will be improved in one way or another. We will be getting a dedicated blog for all of these changes later, but this is the most intriguing so far that caught my eye. We might also see the removal of a few points in agility courses that causes us to fall and reset, revisiting some of the shortcut requirements and add even better ones, and finally a big buff to the Brimhaven Agility Arena as a training method that requires a little bit more clicking than rooftops. As for my opinion, it sounds like the best change is definitely going to be for shortcuts. We have some obstacles in the game that don't really make a lot of sense for the requirement needed and how much time it is supposed to save. Like that one stupid shortcut under a fence between Port Sarim and Draenor Village, for which you need an achievement diary and it saves a whole 3 seconds. Most importantly, for the love of God, make the Hydra shortcut actually a shortcut. I'm pretty sure everyone can agree that it's not really a shortcut, and you're just staring at a black screen for a good 8 seconds. For thieving, we have a few quick ones. There might be some rebalancing to both experience per hour and fail rates for various NPCs you're able to pickpocket. I'm sure almost all of us have tried pickpocketing NPCs at around the level you unlock them, and that is one of the most frustrating things to do in the entire game. You know, things like Master Farmers and Arty Knights, just to mention a few. Stalls might also receive some love, since the only viable way to train on them are fruit stalls at low level, and the Relic of Fish stalls for the rocky pets. Finally, the Gloves of Silence could be buffed, as their current effect reduces the chance of being caught while pickpocketing by 5%. And let's not even talk about how frustrating it is to pickpocket elves and firewatches, because oh boy, it's pretty sad. Slayer is also receiving a few tweaks, and mostly for our low-level brothers and sisters. Some of the entry Slayer level masters will have a couple of tasks removed, and the ones that stay will see fewer numbers to avoid making low-level Slayer feel tedious for just a small amount of experience per hour. Jagex is also proposing the idea of a few uniques that will potentially help set low-level players in their Slayer journey. What these are is yet to be seen, but it seems like a great addition. Granted, out of the 4 Slayer uniques we have, the Imbued Heart is the only one you have to look forward to. The Slayer gem is not bad, but you can just use a normal gem. The last to change to skilling is for fire making. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know of this method until I had to do a little bit of research for this video. Apparently, there is a fire making activity in Dorgus Khan where you fix the light orbs around the city. Each of them gives you 1000 experience, and after you do it 100 times, you will receive an additional 5000 experience. I'm all for buffs, but pretty much everything displaces that content, so I have no idea how it could be improved. Jumping into a few miscellaneous changes, Jagex wants to make Gothic's Rest easier to create, add a Make All to Barbarian Potions, which is also that content, and improve the Ring of Pursuit, the Necklace of Faith, and the Efertis Aid, if I even pronounce that correctly. If you have never heard of these items, I don't blame you, as I have never interacted with this jewelry before. You are seeing them on screen right now, and the only one that makes a little bit of sense is the Ring of Pursuit, to hopefully have something to do with the Hunter Guild and the upcoming Hunter contracts in Valamor. Another dedicated blog will be all about run energy and how our agility level and weight affect how long we can run for. This will guarantee a beta test to see what players think of these changes, but to be quite honest, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Improvements to run energy might make stamina potions a little less valuable, so it seems like it will be difficult to balance this proposal with existing content. Alright fellas, let's get into the meaty part of the video, starting with potential changes to NPC defense and weaknesses. The general idea of this proposal is to make monster weaknesses more meaningful, to give players more choices when it comes to weapons. Currently, the melee combat style has 3 variations, being Stab, Slash, and Crush. Unless a monster or a boss has crazy high defense, you would typically go for your strongest melee weapon and do damage until your enemy reaches 0 HP. This is more obvious, for example, when doing Slayer. If you need to kill gargoyles despite being weak to Crush, weapons like a rapier or a whip will do the trick just fine. Jagex wants to change this to make Crush attack style the first thing you think of when doing this Slayer task. Similarly, if a monster is weak to ranged, it is weak to literally all weapons of said combat style, and you might go for what's most efficient for DPS. Whether it be a blowpipe, a bofa, or the twisted bow if your target has a high magic attack. For magic, you will just use the best and most convenient magic weapon available, like a trident, a sanguinesti, or the powerful Tunic Shadow. One of the most important changes comes in the form of classifying ranged weapons in 3 categories, and giving each monster elemental weaknesses when applicable. For ranged, this means that making javelins and bolts heavy ammunition, arrows standard ammunition, and things like knives and darts light ammunition. This will diversify what weapon you pick when you have a certain target in mind. This also applies to magic, and elemental weaknesses could also be added to some, if not all, monsters in the game, making it so your first weapon of choice isn't one of the previously mentioned. A few obvious ones would be making fire giants weak to water spells, and this change could indirectly buff things like the Harmonized Nightmare Staff, which was heavily devalued after the introduction of the Tunic Shadow. And now, for the most important and controversial part of the blog, let's talk about a lot of changes to some of the most powerful, iconic, and beloved items in the game. I will leave the Fang vs Scythe debate last, so you guys let me know what you think. For starters, we have talks about the Void Waker being too strong, especially in PvP. I guess the guaranteed hit is a little too powerful, making it difficult to design other weapons around it in the future to avoid power creep. I don't know if a simple change to the special attack energy cost might do the trick, or even lowering the minimum hit threshold for PvP. Personally, this is a super satisfying weapon to use in PvM. This is almost the same problem with the Ancient Godsword, and the guaranteed heal if you successfully hit your target could be considered a bit too strong in the current meta. And Jagex might also change it a bit in the future. At the time of making this video, I am still hunting for Soul Reaper axe pieces after 6 months of Desert Treasure 2 being released. But this might also see a couple of changes to avoid making it frustrating to use. In my opinion, it was a huge blunder not making it best in slot, at least at Vardorvis, and it would have been nice using it at Duke Succulus too. The chip damage and stacks disappearing super quickly after a fight ends is honestly extremely annoying. One of the biggest talking points is how powerful the occult necklace is for an item that is around 500k at the time of making this video. And this was even more obvious after the release of the Tunic in Shadow, giving the user 30% magic damage bonus with a single item. I guess if Jagex wants to keep the current best in slot magic power, a simple solution would be to distribute maybe 5% of the occult necklace power to other pieces. For example, give 1% to each piece of Ancestral, 1% to the Imbued Cape, and maybe 1% to the Eternal Boots. For magic, the Tomes of Fire and Water could be buffed for the respective elemental spells. The only thing Jagex will have to do to avoid making them a little bit too strong is how elemental weaknesses will be implemented. Lastly, we might see changes to the minimum hit being 1 instead of 0 to make early game combat feel better. Potential buffs to the Elder Maul and the Inquisitor's armor, since both of them are extremely rare and niche to use. The last to change in the blog, apart from the big one, is making low-level boosting prayers actually worth it, and they might receive some love as well in the future. And now, Scapers, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the Fang versus the Scythe, and potential changes to both of them. As it stands, we can all agree that the Fang is pretty powerful even where it shouldn't be. I typically use it at Slayer trips, a few bosses, and honestly, it feels really good to use. A few of those times though, the Fang is used on Slash, and it has a few people wondering why a stab weapon has this feature. I guess the straw that broke the camel's back is the fact that a Fang on Slash is best in slot at Vardorvis, Awakened Duke, and it can also be used to decent success at a regular Duke as well. This problem also arises from Vardorvis being a 2x2 NPC, and the Scythe not being super powerful there unless Vardorvis is at around the 200 HP or less because of how his defense works. If you have seen the Scythe prices recently, it was almost worth 1 billion GP for just a little bit before going back to around the 850 mil. But prior to that, the Scythe reached an astonishingly low of around 360 mil, and I was lucky to snag one of them at the 380 mil GP after I sold my spoils from the Phantom Uspa. The point of that was not to flex, but rather point out that the price increase was pretty much due to the fact that Jagex is proposing these buffs to it, and some heavy nerfs to the Fang, which made everyone want one of these bad boys. As we all know, the Scythe of Vitur is the best item to obtain from arguably the hardest raid in the game, and for its current state, it doesn't really feel that powerful since we have other options that perform pretty similar to it. And we haven't even talked about how expensive it is to use. Regardless, if you don't have one of these right now, I'm not saying you should dump your bank to get one, but definitely start saving up for a Scythe, as they will start increasing if these changes go through. Apart from lowering the Fang's slash capabilities to make it shine at just the combat style, the Scythe could receive a 15% slash accuracy bonus, and making it slightly cheaper to use at 200 blood runes for each vial of blood as opposed to 300. If you have one of these, you're probably doing better than the average player, and even though these changes welcome, I don't really feel the cost was the main issue. And speaking about charges, a great potential change to it is the fact that charges will only be used up when the Scythe actually hits something and not zeros. If this change is implemented along with a minimum hit, it will still drain 3 charges per hit, but will definitely feel better than seeing 3 blue hit splats on your enemy. And now for just some unscripted thoughts, I believe Jagex is doing this for 2 reasons. Number 1, maybe these changes are going to open the way to more content in the future, whether it be mid-game, late-game, end-game. I think we are years and years away from getting new best-in-slot items for both the weapons and armor, as I believe right now the game is at a pretty healthy state when it comes to power. And the second one is that I think it is kind of weird and toxic how Jagex is designing things around power creep, and I believe the community is mostly to blame for it. Now, if you're a normal person, if you like skilling, if you go on your Slayer trips and, just chill, just play casually, this is not a jab at you, but I believe that, people in the community, some people in the community, especially Twitter, Reddit, I think Jagex is avoiding backlash from them if they want to make something even more powerful. Then, of course, you're going to have players that are against these big changes, and that was extremely obvious with the release or the potential release of the Ruinous Powers. You had people loving these changes, like myself. If I see a big number, I, have a big dopamine rush. And you have other people that say it was either unoriginal or it was going to be way too powerful and it was going to ruin the game. So because of this, I believe Jagex is potentially always going to work around giving us either horizontal upgrades, or maybe eventually when we have something that's new best in slot, they are going to have to maybe make it so current best in slot is not that devalued, just to avoid people complaining and crying about it on social media. And if you have seen Twitter and Reddit, yeah, I believe we all know, the type of opinion that I believe Jagex is avoiding when doing something like this. But, it's their game, their opinion. If it was, my choice, I would let them do whatever they want with the game, remove the poll system to be quite honest, and maybe just ask our opinion on something that's, maybe more design oriented, if we like something like this, but, the design, completely up to them, and yeah, so all of these changes are basically, mostly from community feedback. Boys and girls, that is it for this informative video. I hope you're as excited for these changes as I am, to see where the direction of combat takes us in the future. If you would like to participate in this conversation, let me know what you think of these changes in the comments below, and if you include the term RSN in your comment along with your RuneScape username, you will be entered in a bond giveaway for which we will pick a winner on Friday's stream. A massive thank you to all my channel members for supporting this project monetarily. My wife, my puppy and I appreciate your support a whole ton. If you want to be part of this list of legends, click the join button below to pledge to this channel monetarily and see all the cool perks you can get in the videos, in the live streams, and of course in the Discord. In the next one, we will go over a few tips on how to avoid burnout, as we are 2 days away from Leagues 4 coming to an end. And I'm sure a few of you are lacking motivation to keep playing. Until then, I hope you have an amazing day, have an amazing week, and I will see you then. Peace.